Habitat is a place that animals choose to live. Like human, we have our own home. Habitat selection can be defined as a choice made by the animal of a place in which to live. These choices are influenced by dispersal ability, behavior interaction, physical and chemical factors. Today we are going to focus on moth. Consist of 4 distinct stages of life cycle, starting with eggs, caterpillar or larvae, pupa or cocoon, and lastly adult stage. Male moth will select habitat that is close to female. Female will release pheromones and male can sense it from miles. The male has a very sensitive antenna and able to locate the female. The pheromones will guide him to her. There are a lot of moth species across the globe. Commonly, moth habitat selection are affected by genetics. Moth behavior is passed from one generation to another through hereditary. For example, moth and bee are reared from birth in identical environment, but has different habitat preferences because of genetic basis. Habitat selection also relate to natural selection. For example, 2 colors of moth that lives in England which are black and white. The white moth will likely to be advantageous because it has similar color to the trees, hence, make them invisible to hungry predators like birds. Compared to black moth, they will likely got eaten by predator. However, after the industrial evolution occur, there are a lot of factory has been built. Thus, there are a lot of air pollution. The trees turn black in color, and this time black moth has better advantages than white moth. Black moth seems has outnumbered the white moths. The habitat may no longer suitable for white moth, so there is no environmental cue of that habitat, leaving more offspring to be considered a stable environment for white moth. Also they have lost dispersal abilities. Now black moth is outnumbered the white moth. Did you know that moth has evolved to travel by the glimmer of the moon via transverse orientation? This is how moth aware where they are by keeping the North Star at certain position. They also select their habitat that has lightness sources, but they has fatal relation as it can attract or lure predator. In habitat selection, moth priority is to avoid predators like spider, parasitic fly and bat. In general, moth will use landscape plant as site for hatching their young. Their main objective is to ensure their hatch offspring did not get eaten by predators. Also, adult moth exhibit certain survival techniques in order to maintain survival. Like other species, moth also search widely for food such as leaf, caterpillar, nectar and pollen. Adult moth, they also need to make decision and have their own behavioral techniques to acquire food, foraging behavior. For instance, this moth mimic the hummingbird by making the exact sound and locomotion. Their wings beat rapidly, which at 80 times per second enable them to hover at each flower like other insect. They also fly like hummingbird, and bouncing from one flower to another rapidly. Some moth have bright colors similar to the flower to confuse the bird predator, while some use ultrasound to avoid harmful predator like bat, producing their ultrasound from thorax whenever they sense bat is coming. Like butterfly and amphibian, they portray extremely bright color indicates their toxicity, but moth produce ultrasound to tell their predator that they are toxic, and taste bad even though they are not. There are also moth that mimic jumping spiders such as metalmorph moth. It is crucial to scare the predator and defending its territory against potential competitors. Meanwhile, some moth larvae also have their own anti-predator techniques. For instance, they inflates their interior end to represent as rolled up leaf, dried stick, and also snake head. Next, some moth species have the ability to mimic owl. This strategy ensure them to live happily because many predators are scared of them. Expert says they will not move if we try to disturb them, but they will shake fiercely instead. Amazing, right? Other carnivore caterpillar has strong foraging behavior. They disguised as one of branch and wait for their prey to come. They do not have to use or invest more energy to find food, but using strategic methods. Some moth like Yucca Moth live inside a flower. This tiny moth is white in color, similar to yucca flower color. Both has symbiotic relationships. Because the moth larva feeds on the plant while the moth pollinates the flower, they attach to the stamen of the flower. The flower provides them shelter to them. It is soothing and peaceful. The moth does not have to search for food anymore because they live inside their food bank, which is the flower. Also, it is hard for predator to notice them as they have similar color to the flower. This moth is very lucky. Bagworm moth took defensive anti-predator techniques into another level. At caterpillar stage, they build their own cocoon out of sand, small sticks and leaves. It's like a little log cabin, and they carry them around. They are usually herbivores and their diet depends on where they live. But some also consume small arthropod. Some eat tiny amount of vegetation, tree bark, foliage, and fruit. Like other moth, they will lay eggs on food sources such as leaves. Upon reaching adult stage, bagworm moth will leave their house and fly away to mate male, while female usually stay at their house forever. This adaptation makes them have a greater survival. Not to mention their cocoon blend well with environment, camouflaging them from potential predator.